Hello Katuan Talk, this is Pacific Waves from RNZ Pacific. Minamrami Koroi Hawkins. Coming up, it's proving to be a tight race for urban seats in the Kiribati election.
It's very difficult to say because there is either sides that are competing still.
Also, Pacific leaders are seeking freer movement of people between countries in the region. And later on,
it has been challenging because our culture is very different from the Tongans and very different from the Maori.
A research vessel crewed entirely by Pacific women has arrived in Tonga from Aotearoa. Preliminary election results in Kiribati are showing close contests for constituencies in and around the capital Tarawa, but the opposite in outer island electorates. Radio Kiribati says among those reportedly retaining their seats in this interim results are the incumbent president, Tanis Maumau, in Onotoa, and the opposition leader, Tesi Erialambon, in Abemama. 6 MPs from the last parliament, including one cabinet minister, are reported to have lost their seats so far. An elected council official on Tarawa, Aotearoa, says most seats in the capital look likely to go to the runoff round on Monday, with no candidates clearing the 50% threshold for an outright win.
Whereas in the outer island, they either already completed now. But on Tarawa, it's very difficult to say because there is either sides that are competing still. So we will know by Monday which side is winning.
A woman candidate aiming to enter the Kiribati parliament says the government has struggled to deliver the most basic necessities for its citizens. 45-year-old development worker Ruth Kwansing is one of 18 females out of 114 candidates vying for one of the 44 parliamentary seats being contested in Kiribati's national election. Mrs. Kwansing has made it through to the second round of voting after securing over 3,400 votes in the nation's largest constituency, South Tarawa. She says basic issues are the big problems in the country and she wants to change that.
Just because of the challenges that we have in our government system. So not only are we a country that needs a lot of help and needs all the help we can get, but we actually struggle receiving or properly implementing the help that we do get.
At the midway point in the election, it appears the newcomers to Parliament could hold significant sway. RNZ Pacific's correspondent in Tarawa, Rimon, says in results so far, the ruling TKP party of incumbent President Tanis Maumau appears to have taken most of the outer island seats. But it's a tighter contest for many of the urban seats that will go to the second round on Monday. Rimon says independents are likely to be a factor.
Because a lot of them are appearing in the results. And so if they all form up as opposition, then, that'll be a fair fight. Otherwise, it could replicate what we've seen in the previous House where TKP really had the majority. And so, I think that this can be all confirmed ultimately when the general elections are concluded next week.
In the runoff round on Monday, the top polling candidates in each electorate will go head-to-head. Those polling the highest declared the winners. Leaders in the Pacific are seeking freer movement of people within the region. The matter could be on the agenda when the Pacific Leaders Summit is held in Tonga in 2 weeks. Last week, the matter was raised at the Pacific Islands Forum Economic Ministers meeting in Suva. Fiji's Finance Minister, Biman Prasad, said the Pacific needs to free ourselves quicker than what we expect Australia and New Zealand and others to do. The head of the Development Policy Centre at the Australian National University is Stephen Howes, and Don Wiseman asked him what freer movement means for the Pacific.
Different people mean different things by free movement, and that's one of the factors that makes it a complex issue. I think for some people it suggests that if you want to come, say, to Australia or New Zealand on a short trip as a tourist or a business person, then you shouldn't need to get a visa. You should just be able to turn up. Other people have a sort of more far-reaching interpretation of free movement, which is that you should not only be able to come for short trips, but you should be able to move between the various Pacific countries and stay for as long as you want and work as well. In other words, sort of extend the relationship that Australia and New Zealand has with each other to the broader Pacific region. So different countries do have different interpretations. It is a complex issue, but it is very interesting that, now really for the first time, the forum is weighing in on this issue and in a positive way.
Well, what would they endeavour to do?
Well, I think what the interesting thing that happened at the Forum Economic Ministers meeting is this relatively new Secretary General, Baron Wanga, in his opening remarks that we must, and I'm quoting, we must advocate for freer movement of our people within the islands, including Australia and New Zealand, to facilitate greater regional economic cooperation and integration. Those are very significant comments for several reasons. I mean, first of all, in the last year, we've had the leaders of, say, Samoa, Fiji, Solomon Islands, all make this call. And so now you have the region's top bureaucrat echoing what national leaders are saying. Second, he's talking about freer movement. So it's not saying free movement, which is, a very radical idea, but he's talking about progress towards that goal, freer movement. I think that's very sensible. He's putting the spotlight on Australia and New Zealand. Those are the two countries that the nationals of the various Pacific Island countries really want access to. And then finally, he's putting it in this framing of regional economic cooperation and integration. And that's a universally held view that there should be more regional economic cooperation and integration. And what he's saying is, well, if we want that, then we've got to turn our minds to this big issue of freer movement of people. I'm not saying the issue's been resolved. We yet to see the communique from the Forum Economic Ministers meeting, but from the press conference, my colleague was there. I wouldn't say it's been adopted, but it's more that now it's on the agenda. And that's a big step forward. That this issue, that was being taken up by individual leaders is now on the agenda for the forum as a whole. I'd say that's a major step forward.
It's all about coming to Australia and New Zealand, isn't it? Because there can't be much desire within small Pacific countries to move to other small Pacific countries, can there?
Well, look, there is migration between Pacific countries, and we see a lot of Fijians going to PNG, but also to other Pacific countries to work. We see other Pacific Island country nationals going to Fiji to study, sometimes for health treatment. We see some of the countries like, say, Cook Islands, where they already have free movement of travel to Australia and New Zealand. We see them looking not only to Asia, but within the Pacific to meet their labour shortages. So there is movement between Pacific Island countries. I wouldn't discount that. But yes, it's just the Australia and New Zealand economies, obviously, they're so much bigger. And their minimum wages are so much higher that they are the major attraction, the sort of major game in town for this issue of a free or freer movement.
It would be a huge step for Australia and New Zealand, wouldn't it? Do you think they'd embrace it?
Well, that's the thing. I think it's not going to happen overnight. But in the past, the Pacific has formed documents, such as the current 2050 strategy that hasn't even mentioned free movement. And I think it's the sort of thing that could be held up as a vision in the distant future, 2050, free movement. And then, you start to look at, well, what can we do? What concrete steps can we take? And, steps have already been taken. If you take a longer term view, you've got these temporary labour mobility schemes, the RSC and PALM, that you didn't have 20 years ago. That's a type of movement of people. You've got these ballot-based visas that New Zealand's had for a long time that Australia's just introduced. That also is a step towards freer movement of people. The recent agreement between Australia and Tuvalu is also a step in that direction. I know there's now talk about having a Pacific Business Travel Card, copying what APEC does, where business leaders between APEC countries are able to travel just on the basis of a card that lasts for 5 years. So the idea itself, free movement, is a radical one. That should be in the sort of the vision statement. But where the discussion needs to go now is how do we move in that direction, in the direction of freer movement of people. And having it on the forum agenda, will certainly help with that, because that, I think it's great if the forum economic ministers take it up. Their sort of core agenda is that one of economic cooperation and integration. But, the Pacific's not a trading region. So if we really want to realize that vision, economic cooperation and integration, you need to look at free or freer movement of people. So I think it's good to see the Forum Economic Ministers meeting take this up. And it'll be interesting to see, whether this idea, now that the Secretary General is backing it, whether it gets a look in at the leaders meeting in Tonga, or, whether that's too early at this stage.
An all-female Pacific crewed research vessel, which set sail from Aotearoa last month, has arrived in Tonga. Co-led by Tongan captain Aonofo Havea and Fealofani Brune, the first Samoan woman to qualify as a yacht master, they sailed Hinemoa 2 from the Bay of Plenty to Tongatapu, conducting research on whale populations during its voyage. Grace Fiavai has the story.
The wahine sailing the Hinemoa The second integrated traditional knowledge into their research practices, blending science and cultural wisdom to try and advance understanding of our marine environments. Captain Aotearoa Javier says the 10 days at sea were tough for the crew, but they all pulled together. Javier says she is proud of them and the fact that they come from all over the Pacific.
It was a total of 12 crew on board, including 3 captains on board. Is myself and Fialofane Brun. She's the first woman captain for Samoa, and also Jules Pasby, the first woman captain for the Maori Aotearoa. And the total of our crew, 4 Tongans, 2 Samoan, 1 from Cook Islands, and the rest from New Zealand.
She says they encountered many challenges, but they never stopped sailing and the traditional knowledge kept them on course.
Our pin for our forehead broke. What we did, we just get all the rope and then lash it. And not only that's all our network was down as well. So we didn't have a communication. We have satellite phone on board, but for our internet to check our weather and stuff like that, emails and stuff was out. So that's the best of doing traditional navigation, of knowing both new technology now and the traditional knowledge, so that we still know where we're going.
Captain Javier says their journey proved to her that women can do anything, even against the strongest of winds.
As we show everybody, us women can do anything. What we do is to empower more women.
Voyage co-lead and yacht master Fialofane Brun says the journey was also about building a waka for Tonga.
Excited to be part of this project in gaining a waka for Tonga and building this capacity on training and certifying crew, Tongan crew, Apa Nui crew. It was with the point that in order to interact and build the capacity for these organizations, you have to be a part of them. You have to be you have to look at them as your own whānau, and that builds the trust within them and with you.
Brun said the diversity of the crew meant everyone had their own way of doing things, but they were able to overcome these differences and weave all their skills and knowledge together.
It has been challenging because our culture is very different from the Tongans and very different from the Maoris. Yeah. It's challenging in the sense that you also respect your space. You know your limitations. You know what capacity you're able to bring with. And it's not always the right way. It's just the right way in their eyes, their cultures. But at the same time, it's where we're able to weave our understandings and our challenges together.
Captain Jolene Busby says making the journey with an all-female crew sends a strong message and paves the way for our rangatahi.
Uplifting our rangatahi, that they are our backbone, they are our future. How our captains are always having this guided light for the rest of the crew to follow through.
The Hinemua II and her crew will be in Tonga for a few months conducting research and also attending the Pacific Islands Forum Leaders Summit, which Tonga is hosting later this month. They plan to sail back to Aotearoa in November.
That's Pacific Waves for today. For all episodes, head over to rnz.co.nz/Pacific. We're also on Spotify, Apple and iHeartRadio. From myself and the RNZ Pacific team, luki mufala bike next time more.